welcome back everyone. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of our discussion on the postcolonial poem. In part 1, we explored the background of poem, and analysis of the poem. Now in part 2, we turn to Soyinka's Telephone Conversation, a poem that presents the theme of racial discrimination. Soyinka makes use of different literary devices, such as irony and imagery, to highlight the absurdity of prejudice and to assert dignity in the face of insult. Let's move to the themes of the poem. Number 1 theme is racial discrimination. The central theme of the poem is racial prejudice and the dehumanization of black individuals in everyday life. The landlady's question, "How dark? Are you light or very dark?" reduces the speaker's worth to the pigmentation of his skin. This abrupt shift in tone from politeness to blunt interrogation dramatizes the insidious nature of the racism. It can intrude into ordinary, even transsectional exchanges and undermines any sense of equality. The speaker's shock and disgust reveal how such discrimination was normalized in post-colonial Britain, particularly in contexts such as housing, employment, and education. Soyinka thus exposes racism not as an isolated incident, but as a systemic issue today embedded within society. The second theme of the poem, irony and satire. Soyinka employs irony and satire to highlight the absurdity of racist attitudes. The landlady's ignorance, cloaked in politeness, is dismantled by the speaker's sharp wit. When he remarks that his palms and soles are white, he deliberately exaggerates to underscore the irrationality of judging human worth by skin color. Similarly, his ironic suggestion that his complexion could be described in terms of chocolate shades parodies the trivialization of his identity. These satirical elements not only ridicule the landlady's prejudice, but also expose the contradictions of a so-called progressive society that continues to uphold colonial hierarchies of race. The poem therefore critiques both personal prejudice and the broader cultural hypocrisy of post-colonial society. Third theme, communication and misunderstanding. The poem's title, Telephone Conversation, is itself deeply ironic. What unfolds is not meaningful dialogue, but a breakdown of communication. The landlady's silence after the speaker reveals his race is more telling than her words, as it embodies a reluctance to confront her own prejudice. Her obsessive repetition of the question about her skin tone demonstrates her inability or willingness to recognize his humanity beyond racial classification. The speaker's frustration is captured in his description of feeling like a mere machine, stripped of individuality and reduced to data for her judgment. Thus, Soyinka reveals how racism impedes authentic communication and creates barrier to mutual understanding. The fourth theme, dignity and identity. Despite the degrading questions, the speaker asserts his identity with intelligence and composure. He describes himself as West African sepia, borrowing the official language of his passport, thereby reclaiming authority over the definition of his own identity. His ironic and satirical responses are not signs of surrender, but of resistance, highlighting his refusal to be demeaned by prejudice. The speaker's voice becomes a vehicle of dignity, exposing the ignorance of the landlady, while affirming his intellectual and moral superiority. This insistence on self-respect reflects a broader post-colonial struggle. The fight to reclaim identity and humanity from the stereotypes and categories imposed by colonial and racist ideology. Let's move to the fifth theme of this poem, humor and sarcasm as resistance. In Telephone Conversation, Soyinka uses humor and sarcasm not merely for entertainment, but as a powerful strategy of resistance against racism. The speaker, though subjected to blunt and offensive questions about his skin color, refuses to show anger or humiliation. Instead, he responds with the sharp wit and ironic comparisons, turning the landlady's prejudice into a subject of ridicule. This sarcastic tone highlights the absurdity of racial judgment, exposing how shallow and ignorant such discrimination is. Humor in this context functions as both a weapon. It preserves the speaker's dignity while simultaneously undermining the authority of the racist voice. By laughing at prejudice, Soyinka empowers the marginalized voice and transforms a painful experience into a moment of intellectual and moral victory. Let's move to the poetic devices. Number one is imagery and irony. Wol Soyinka Billy used two literary devices to deliver the message of anger and frustration towards the racial discrimination at the micro level of the society. Imagery in the line of lipstick-coated, gold-rolled cigarette holder pipe is the mental image of the lady made by the African speaker by just listening to her voice in the phone. His attitude towards her is that she is socially superior than him and from a higher strata. The image of a huge bus crushing the black tar is highly symbolic of how major white community dominates the insults the minor African community. He becomes so angry when she further asks about the darkness of his color to confirm his identity that he sees red everywhere. The other important poetic device is irony that the poet uses in the poem. The irony lies in the fact that the lady has given an ad about the flat stating that the price is reasonable and indifferent in the case of color of the skin of any people. But when the African room seeker confesses about his identity, she holds a silence and does not respond to him. Her words and action do not match in any way. Her words appear to be liberal and generous, but in reality, her actions are full of hatred and indifference. Just the opposite of her words. This irony is meant to attack the so-called social equality created by the whites. The next irony is that the speaker itself, the African speaker's self-confession about his identity to the white lady, which vividly shows his loser mentality and lack of confidence in his own color of the skin, upon which he does not have any control. He has to be so meek and feel lower as if he has committed any crime. Number two device used by the poet is satire. Wol Soyinka's poem Telephone Conversation employs satire to expose the absurdity of racism. Satire as a literary device uses humor, irony, and exaggeration to highlight society's flaws, and Soyinka applies these techniques to reveal the irrationality of racial prejudice. The landlady's absurd question asking whether the speaker is light or very dark reduces a human being to a skin tone. This moment sterilizes the illogical obsession with color, making her prejudice appear laughable rather than authoritative. The speaker responds with humor, describing himself as West African sepia or plain milk chocolate. These witty replies mock the landlady's ignorance and highlight the ridiculousness of her fixation on shades of blackness. Irony strengthens the satire throughout the poem. The speaker refers to his admission of being African as a confession, as if it were a crime, which exposes the absurd societal expectation that his identity is something shameful. Similarly, the landlady is described with terms suggesting refinement and good breeding, but her bigoted question reveals her vulgarity. This contrast makes her appear foolish, showing how prejudice undermines the very dignity she claims to have. The speaker's mock scientific explanation pointing out that the palms of his hands and soles of his feet are white, further ridicules the landlady's obsession with skin color. By exaggerating her demand for detail, Soyinka highlights the sheer stupidity of judging people by complexion. Through wit, sarcasm, and irony, Soyinka turns the lady's racism into a spectacle of ridicule. The satire entertains, but at the same time, it delivers a sharp critique. Racism is not only cruel, it is also illogical, hypocritical, and worthy of mockery. Third device is metaphor and alliteration. Metaphor, like spectroscopic, was used to compare the lady's mind with equipment, which was used to judge a color. The significance of using the metaphor was to show the landlady was eager to find out what the color of the poet was. Alliteration, like clinical and crushing, was used to emphasize the coolness in landlady's tone when she knew he was African. Number 4 device that is used is enjambment. The poem uses a lot of enjambment, meaning that his anxiety and discomfort express themselves through sentences that spill from line to line as the speaker tries to get through his racist telephone conversation. The poems and stops, by contrast, tend to appear in the speaker's moment of self-assurance and confidence. Number 5 is symbolism. Colors like sepia, raven black, peroxide blonde symbolizes racial obsession. The landlady's voice, by comparing it to a cigarette holder, acts as a symbol of wealth and privilege. Now let's move to the conclusion of the poem. Postcolonial writers tend to divert attention to the trauma, mental prison, social injustice, and racism faced by non-European and non-white communities. African literary figures played an important role in exposing the dictatorship that emerged in their social context even after the legal autonomy of the black race. Telephone conversation stands as a symbol of exploitative colonialism dominated by racism, othering, and stereotyping. While Soyinka's relentless use of the word madam and dark in the poem is imperative to the dichotomous relation between Orient and the Occident. In the poem, the poet protests against colonial rule and the discrimination faced by blacks. The poem is a psychological narrative of colonizers' practice of othering and stereotyping the black man. The elements of othering, racism, and stereotyping are evident in the lady's discourse, which is rancid and disgorges racist remarks by developing a sense of inferiority in the renter. The renter struggles to declare and claim his identity. The marginal colonial influence psychologically suppresses him. Soyinka epitomizes the threat caused by the post-colonial practice of othering and stereotyping based on racial discrimination. Postcolonialism attempts to change people's view to propagate equal relations between them. As a post-colonial writer, Soyinka embarks on changing the Western view of the East, mainly Africa, through the poem Telephone Conversation. The conversation between the two is a nightmare, and this attitude must be vindicated and changed. Thank you for staying engaged, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the poem Telephone Conversation by Soyinka in our discussion forum. Allah Hafiz.